Good afternoon. Today is Friday, October the 2nd, and we are continuing our discussion of the way that England and France took differing directions in developing government. England becoming a constitutional monarchy, and France becoming an absolute monarchy. And so let us then proceed. Let's pull this up first, shall we? Yes. So Charles the First, remember, we're now in the Stuart dynasty, James the First, and now Charles the First. Charles the First succeeded James the First, and Charles the First was even a more astute believer in the divine rights of kings theory than was his father. And what we see here throughout this unit in England is a struggle over one central question. In England, who is superior? Is the king superior or is the parliament superior? When we began this unit, the king was superior to parliament. When we will end this unit, that's going to change. So parliament greeted Charles, with what was called the Petition of Right. What it was, Parliament had gotten fed up with James the First, and so they say, okay, we've got a new king here. We're going to start off. We're going to put the king in his place. That was a document basically limiting the right of the king to wage war and levy taxes without permission of Parliament, because both things cost the Parliament money. Charles agreed to the petition, but he was like one of those things. So Charles then enters into a peace agreement with the French to conserve his money for other engagements. He also instituted a policy known as a thorough, which was a way for Charles to rule more directly. In other words, Charles was finding ways to circumvent the authority of Parliament. He also placed a tax, a direct tax known as ship money, on the whole of England to pay for naval protection, once again without the consent and advice of Parliament, to which Parliament greatly objected. It was Charles, however, religious practices that got him in the soup, so to speak. William Land, his advisor, wanted him to get all of England and Scottish churches to conform to the Anglican style of, the Anglican faith, basically. And most Scottish were Presbyterians, Scottish Calvinists. The Scots rebelled. Charles then needed money to put down the rebellion, and Parliament was not giving. Parliament at the time was led by a man, as you see there, named John Pym. King Charles I dissolved the Parliament, sent them home. This was called the Short Parliament. Those are the dates. So and I think about it, 1640, this is right towards the end of the 30 Years' War. Back in the day before COVID, I used to have students do the timeline, and you could see how these things would overlap, but that's not happening. So when Presbyterian Scots invaded and defeated an English army, John reconvened Parliament saying, look, guys, I need some money. You guys are going to help me out. And this becomes what is known as the Long Parliament. It lasts for 20 years. The Long Parliament, though, was divided over the precise direction to take on religious reforms. Both moderate Puritans and Presbyterians and more extreme Puritans, the Independents, wanted to abolish the Episcopal system, as well as the use of the Book of Common Prayer. Saying, what are you talking about, Mr. Horton? The Episcopal system, taken from the word Episcopalian, hopefully you guys know. And I didn't tell you this, and now you're finding a place to write. The Anglican Church, the church that Henry VIII started, the Church of England, the Anglican Church, is also called the Episcopalian Church. In fact, it's called the Episcopalian Church in the United States. And of course, Mr. Arlinghouse knows why. And the reason why the Church of England is called the Episcopalian Church in the United States is because after the American Revolution, even though many people in the United States, yeah, of course, they'd broken off from England, but they still followed the Anglican faith, the faith of the Church of England. But it really wasn't too cool after the American Revolution to say, yeah, I'm a member of the Church of England. And so they changed the name to kind of get away from that, call it the Episcopalian Church. So getting back to the matter at hand, wanted to abolish the Episcopal system. That's a unified church system. Because one thing you learn about the Puritans, they thought that the Anglican Episcopalian Church was too watery. The majority of Presbyterians wanted to allow Calvinist type reforms and a fully decentralized church. The Anglican Church was controlled from London, literally. Yeah, the Anglican Church was controlled from London, and the majority of Presbyterians, being Calvinists, in the Calvinist faith, they like a church of local control that makes their own decisions. Conservatives on both houses of Parliament, the House of Lords and House of Commons, wanted to preserve the English church in its current form. A rebellion then broke out in Ireland. Not Scotland, Ireland. Look on that map we're going to talk a lot about Ireland. You need to know the map of the British Isle. England, Scotland up here, and then that little island off to the west, that's Ireland. The island that England has treated like its own backyard, a place where it walks its dog, if you know what I mean. But anyway, back to the matter at hand. So a rebellion broke out in Ireland, and Parliament, led by John Pym, said that the Parliament should not trust Charles I with an army, and that the Parliament should be the ones who raise and lead the army themselves, which, of course, Charles I was just not buying into that. Charles I thought that this division, though, within Parliament was his chance to reassert his authority over the crown. And so on December 1st, 1641, Charles once again was presented with another document called the Grand Remonstrance, a 200-article summary of popular and parliamentary grievances against the king. He, the king, Charles I, sent the army into Parliament, literally into the Parliament itself, to arrest Pym and all the other conspirators, but they had already escaped. The House of Commons passed a document called the Military Ordinance, which gave Parliament the right to raise its own army, which they did. The war began in August. This is the English Civil War. Began in August and was fought over two main issues. Would absolute monarchy or parliamentary government rule England? And would English religion be controlled by the king's bishops in the case of the Anglican Church and conform to high Anglican practice, or adopt a decentralized Calvinist Presbyterian style of governance? Charles' supporters were called the Cavaliers and were primarily located in the northern western half of England. All right, now I want to show you something, okay? Look at this. This is our first political cartoon. Often, political cartoons are used in AP Euro as documents. And they'll show you a cartoon like this and has no captions. Or maybe they'll say, actually, I've seen questions where it says, what is this cartoon talking about? Of course, the cartoon's talking about the English Civil War. So, once again, the supporters of Charles I were called Cavaliers. The word Cavalier means cheap little POC Chevrolet. I'm just kidding. Chevy Cavalier? No? They aren't really. But anyway, Cavalier is a French word. It means man who rides a horse. From the word cavalier, we get our own word cavalry, also chivalry. Chivalry is a code of conduct, which, people of manners are supposed to abide by. But now the Cavaliers, they were the support of the king. They were by and large wealthy. They were very fashionable. And so now look, can you tell which of these two groups, you see them there, would be the Cavaliers? I'm just waiting for an answer. Mr. Arlinghouse not answering. But anyway, so you look. Look at the guys. I see. I guess that's on your left. See the guys with the long hair, the fashionable hats, and what tells you that these guys, what kind of person rides a horse? You have to remember that the great majority of people, all the way through history, horses are expensive, and individual ownership of a horse means that you either own a farm or you have some money. So which one of these two guys, sets of guys, are horsemen? Anyone? 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 What are these? So obviously these guys are the Cavaliers. In fact, look at this. Even their dog has the hair. I love this cartoon. Now, the guys on the other side, does their dress remind you of anything? Do they remind you of anything? For example, when you were 5, 6, 7 years old and it was Thanksgiving, does their attire remind you of anything from that era? If it does, then you get it. Yeah, they look like pilgrims because remember, the pilgrims were Puritans. These are the Cavaliers. These guys were called the Roundheads. Why were they called the Roundheads? Because they cropped their hair relatively short. Relatively. I say relatively because look at this. You have to remember that men during this age, all the way through, the early 19th century, men wore their hair long, fashionably long. Men spent a lot of time addressing their hair, but not the Puritans, not the Roundheads. They kept theirs cropped pretty short by standard of the day. Also notice their plain dress, their buckle shoes, and so yeah. Now here the cartoonist depicts the English Civil War as a pit fight. We never really discussed pit fighting yesterday. Pit fighting is exactly what you're seeing here. Two dogs are set upon each other, and people bet upon the outcome. Although, once again, Puritans would never do that. But the cartoonist depicts the English Civil War as a pit fight. I mean, look. Even so, this guy is saying, "To him, Poodle." That must be his name, Poodle. And then this guy's saying, "Bite him, Pepper." That's this dog's name. Even the dogs talk trash. Look at this. This dog, the Cavalier dog, calls the other dog roundhead cur. You say, what's a cur? A cur is a person of low birth. Oh, and this dog knows how to throw shade himself. He calls the other Cavalier dog. I love the cartoon myself. Yeah, we'll see lots of political cartoons. I do want to show you one more thing. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Where you at, Horton? Right there. Go to pictures. Go to Chicago Art Institute. Or is it Cincinnati Art Institute? There it is. I found this statue, and it's a life-size statue. This thing's about 5 feet tall, in the Art Institute of Chicago, and this is a Puritan. Yeah. a Puritan. So it gives you a better idea of their dress. Puritans didn't say Puritans were poor, they just dressed very plainly for the day. Pardon me. Okay, where am I at? Yes. So now we know who the two sides were in the English Civil War. Cavaliers versus the Roundheads. The Roundheads were from the southwest part of England, and the Roundheads were primarily Puritans. They were the most radical backers of the Roundheads. The war divided England chiefly along religious lines. The Puritans tended to favor Parliament. Oliver Cromwell, there's a name better remember. Oliver Cromwell led the Puritans, Roundheads, to victory and then claimed the leadership of England for 11 years. I mean, yeah, those 11 years are quite interesting. What eventually led to the Puritan victory was an alliance with the Scots against the king, and when John Pym persuaded Parliament to accept the terms of the Solid League and Covenant. You say, what does that mean? It means that John Pym persuaded Parliament, hey, let's give the Scots what they want, and the Scots will help us defeat Charles I. And that's what they did. And about 100 years later, the English turned on the Scots and crushed them like a bug. Nice guys, the English. I mean, that's the thing. I actually have a picture I'll have to show you someday. You know, England in American history books and in English history books are normally, you know, they're good guys. Not always so. Yeah. So back to the matter at hand. The second factor was the leadership of this guy, Oliver Cromwell. Oliver Cromwell was a Puritan, a devout Puritan, but he was also a brilliant military commander and also merciless. After he gains control of England, he is going to pound Ireland into the ground, literally. So, second factor in the leadership of Cromwell, whose primary concern was freedom of worship of extreme Puritanism. Cromwell led the Allies to victory at Marston Moor and Naseby. The independent rump parliament, who had been reduced in number by Colonel Thomas Pride, used its power and convened a special court, and this court had Charles I executed as a common criminal. I hope that you took the time to watch that little 10-minute video on the English Civil War. They have cute little things that, yeah. So, 1649 to 1660, this is what is called the Cromwellian period. England does not have a king because Charles I was executed. There is no king for 11 years. Oliver Cromwell rules England under the title of Lord Protector. England officially became a Puritan republic, and during this time conquered Ireland and Scotland, and this created the single political entity known as, going forward, Great Britain. Yes, Great Britain. Parliament then tried to disband the 50,000-man army, and Cromwell marched in and disbanded Parliament and ruled as Lord, basically a dictator, until his death in 1660. Yeah, and the thing about it was the English, rather the Parliament, who had wanted to get rid of Charles I so badly, found out that sometimes the devil you know is better than the one you don't, and Oliver Cromwell was definitely the one they didn't know. Oliver Cromwell, let's just call him the no fun guy. I mean, you know, he epitomized what it meant to be a Puritan. So, his military dictatorship proved to be just as harsh and more hated than Charles I. His budget tripled that of Charles I. Cromwell was as intolerant of Anglicans, the majority of the English population, as Charles had been of Puritans. Now, but look what he did. He also shut down all the taverns in England. I mean, imagine that. And I don't drink alcohol, but I do know that people like to go to pubs and taverns and drink alcohol. If it's a business, it's a business that makes money. He shut down all the taverns, shut down the brothels, yes, houses of prostitution. racetracks, gaming houses. You know, he even, get this, wait for it. You will never believe what the guy did. You know, actually, there's two things he did. You'll never believe. Number one, he banned Christmas. I'm not lying. He banned Christmas. For 11 years, no Christmas in England. And two, he actually took the crown jewels and had them cut to pieces and sold. Yeah, yeah. He sold the crown jewels of England. Political liberty in England vanished in favor of religious extremism. I mean, England quickly became the no fun zone. And Oliver Cromwell was harsh and brutal, and he ruled England with an iron hand. By his death in 1660, most of England was more than ready to put a king back on the throne. And you know what, guys? Um, let's look at one more thing. Let's see if I can pull him up. Oliver Cromwell. Don't do that. There it is. I took all kind of cool pictures when I was in England. That is a wax death mask of none other than, you got it, Oliver Cromwell. Yeah, I mean, you know, when you travel to England, I'm sorry, when you travel to Europe, and you will one day, you will, you're going to make a commitment. I'm going to travel to Europe. It's the greatest place on the earth to visit. And you only have a week, 10 days. Where do you go? Make sure you include London. London is expensive, but as far as bang for your buck, as far as things to see, I think there's no better venue in all of Europe than London. I mean, there's so many historical things to see. And also the weather's okay. And, you know, and that's nice. And when I say everything, most of it's along the Thames River, on either side of the Thames River. And, you know, you buy what you call a London pass. And with a London pass, you can get into literally everything. Westminster Cathedral. You can get into St. Paul's Cathedral. You can get into the Tower of London. You can take a boat tour up and down the Thames. Now, I don't think you can get in the Eye of London, but there are the London Bridge, the Tower Bridge, rather, which is really interesting in itself. And so many of these things. Wes and I were even able to go to Wimbledon and see Wimbledon. We went to Stamford Bridge, which is where Chelsea plays football. You can get into Wembley Stadium and see these great stadiums. But now, another thing that's great about London, you know, most churches and cathedrals in London, unless you have in England, most churches, in fact, most churches in Europe that are worth their salt, charge you admission to go in. But their museums, free, totally free. And I'm talking about all their museums, military museums, history museums, art museums. And, you know, the English stole the best artwork on earth. Yes, the English stole the best artwork on earth. Great guys, those English. Anyway, I'm going to leave you here, and we will pick up Monday. Monday. And I hope that you guys have an awesome weekend and get all your homework done. You know, I'm sorry, but this is what AP Euro is. And we continue to make progress. Thank you for today, and I'll see you later.